Welcome back. All right, I want to talk about the Seattle Kraken today. Now, I did talk about the Kraken early in the season when things weren't really going all that well. Now we're going to talk about things since they're still not really going all that well. So they're currently 8-12-6. So they've won 8 out of 26 games. That's problematic. Now, 6 of those losses are in extra time, but still problematic nonetheless. Last year at this point, they were 15-8-3. So they were 7 games above 500. Now they're 4 games below 500, meaning they have to be that much better to get themselves back in the hunt than they were last season. And I just don't know if I see that happening. So between October 29th and December 1st of last year, they won 12 out of 14. And that's the kind of run that Seattle needs. And I talked about that the last video that I made on Seattle. And since then, it hasn't gotten better. So their goal scoring, 2.65 goals scored per game, is 29th. Last year, they were number one at 5-on-5 scoring. That we didn't expect them to necessarily be number one, but this drop-off is way more than I would have expected. Their goals against is 23rd at 3.42 goals against per game. So they're not scoring enough and they're allowing too many, a standard practice of teams that are at or near the bottom of the league. Their power play is around middle of the pack. 21.7% is 14th overall. Their penalty kill, 74.7%, 24th overall. Their 423 points percentage is tied with the Sabres for 27th overall in the NHL. So there are a number of teams they need to jump over if they're going to get into the playoffs, and they need to have one of those 12 wins in 14 games kind of runs. And there hasn't been any sign of that. And it doesn't matter where they're playing. They're 4-6-1 at home. They're 4-6-5 away from home. And they've lost 5 in a row. They're currently 3-4-3 in their last 10 games. Just mediocre. Mediocre, middle of the pack. And not a lot of fight back either. The game against Montreal the other night, it just felt like it was a team that didn't have enough oomph to their game to really and truly threaten to tie that game against Montreal. Now, Jared McCann, when we look at the players from last year, their top players, McCann's fallen off. Now, that might have been expected, but by this amount, he's gone from last year in 79 games, he had 40 goals, 30 assists, 70 points. This year, 26 games, 5 goals, or 12 goals, 5 assists, 17 points. So he's dropped from 0.886 points per game to 0.654. So that's dropped off. Now, what I talked about with Buffalo yesterday is similar to what we're going to talk about with Seattle here. You need somebody to pick up that slack now, right? So Dunn, the numbers have stayed about the same for Dunn. Last year in 81 games, he had 14 goals, 50 assists, 64 points. This year in 26 games, 4 goals, 17 assists, 21 points. He's gone from 0.79 points per game to 0.808 points per game. So, again, Dunn has stayed about the same. Now, there were complaints early in the season about the defensive side of the game with Vince Dunn, but with the offense being as good as it is, the defense may suffer in comparison. Eberle's production's dropped off. Last year, 82 games, 20 goals, 43 assists, 63 points. This year in 23 games, 3 goals, 9 assists, 12 points. He's dropped from 0.768 points per game to 0.552. Matty Beniers has dropped off, sophomore slump. 80 games, 24 goals, 33 assists, 57 points last year on his way to the Calder Trophy. This year, 26 games, 4 goals, 9 assists, 13 points. To put it into perspective, if Beniers was a rookie this year putting up those point totals, there would be no discussion of him for Rookie of the Year. 0.713 points per game last year. This year, exactly a 0.5 points per game. So that's quite the drop-off. Yanni Gourde has dropped off too. 81 games last year, 14 goals, 34 assists, 48 points. This year, 26 games, 4 goals, 7 assists, 11 points. He's dropped from 0.593 points per game to 0.423. Daniel Sprong left the team, 66 games last year, 21 goals, 25 assists, 46 points. I did see people talking about, well, defensively he wasn't very good, which, hey, that may very well be valid, but I think Detroit's pretty happy with Sprong. He's given them a lot of offense, and it's the kind of numbers that Seattle would appreciate having back in their lineup if Sprong was still here. Bjorkstrand, his numbers have actually gone up. So 81 games last year, 20 goals, 25 assists, 45 points. This year, in 26 games, 7 goals, 13 assists, 20 points. Nice bounce back for Bjorkstrand. From 0.556 points per game to 0.769 points per game. So for points per game, he is right behind Dunn on this team. So Bjorkstrand's been good. Jaden Schwartz, His points production has actually come up from last year. Last year, 71 games, 21 goals, 19 assists, 40 points. This year in 23 games, 8 goals, 7 assists, 15 points. He's missed a few games with injury, of course. His points per game has gone from .563 points per game to .652 points per game. And then there's the goaltending question with Seattle. Martin Jones, he had a record of 27-13-3 last year, .886 save percentage. For some reason, they won with Jones in the net. He wasn't particularly great, but they won the games he played. They scored a lot of goals with Martin Jones in the net. This year, of course, Martin Jones, he's Toronto Maple Leafs property. Number 3 goaltender, has spent time with the Marlies. I was honestly mildly surprised that Seattle didn't try to hold on to him, though I did, yes, want Decord as backup. And I don't think the goaltending is the reason why things are bad, but Grubauer, 17-14-4 last year, .893 save percentage. This year he's 5-8-1 with an .883 save percentage. You can't have an .880 or around there save percentage as a starter. Decord 2-1-1 last year with a .900 save percentage. This year he's 3-4-5 with an .898 save percentage. Decord's been good at times, and I do think you can make an argument for whether or not Decord's outplayed Grubauer at times. But is goaltending an issue? If this team's going to get back into the hunt for a playoff spot, that is going to have to improve. The defensive side's going to have to improve. And they need more goals. Being 29th overall in goals scored per game, not getting it done. So when we look at the 3 years that this team has existed, it's interesting because the points percentage was .366 in year 1. Last year was .610, so pretty good. And this year it's .423. So they're still getting points at a better rate than they did their first year. However, after the season they had last year, it's seen as a huge fallback. So the first period's actually been good to them this year. They're scoring 27. They've allowed 23. Last year they scored 86. They allowed 76. Their first year in the NHL, they scored 60 and they allowed 83. So the first period's been fine, but then the rest of the game happens. So this year they've scored 22. They've allowed 29 in the second period. Last year they scored 107 and allowed 93. So second periods were crazy last year in Seattle games. In their first year, they scored 75. They allowed 94. So very little difference in goals against in the second period between year 1 and year 2, but an explosion of 32 extra goals in the second period last year, an explosion which seems to have dissipated this year. They're on pace for goals scored about the same as that first year when it comes to second periods. And the third period, well, it's kind of a non-factor for them. They're allowing 35 goals so far this season. They've scored 18. So that's a problem, especially when you're already behind after the second period, right? Last year they scored 87. They allowed 79 in the second period, or in the third period, I should say. And in their first year, they scored 77. They allowed 102 in that third period. So they're on pace to allow more goals than they did their first year in the third period, which is definitely an issue. And this is a team that needs to turn things around. Figure out what you're doing in the first period and do that and avoid the rest of it. In overtime, their first year, they scored once. They allowed 5. And I remember that being a storyline that they hadn't had an overtime winner. And then last year, they scored 9 times in overtime and allowed 4. This year, they've scored twice and they've allowed 3 in overtime. So overtime was a wasteland for them in year 1, kind of, sort of. I mean, it's only 6 games decided in overtime. But this year in the 5, they've had decided in overtime already. They've only won 2 out of the 5. And once you're giving away those points, it's only so long before you're saying, hey, so now we've given up 11 points in that extra time, and we should stop doing that. Their hits numbers have come down as well, which kind of surprised me. So their first year, 21.45 hits per 60 minutes. Last year, 21.77. This was a team that punished you. And this year, 17 hits per 60 minutes. So their hits have definitely dropped off. And that's troubling when you consider they're scoring less, which means they probably have the puck less as well. And so that's the teams that have the puck the least are the ones that should be hitting the most, because you can only throw a hit when your team does not have the puck. So otherwise it's interference, right? So yeah, their hits being down is definitely troubling. So how does the rest of the month look? Are things going to get better? It's going to be tough. Tomorrow night, they're at home against New Jersey. Now, New Jersey is heating up. They're 12-10-1, so that's going to be a tough matchup. Then on Saturday, and again at home, this is a nice homestand for them, but look at the teams coming in. Tampa Bay's 11, 10, and 5. Tampa Bay's been unpredictable. But Tampa Bay, we know, can score goals. We know Seattle struggles to score goals, so how's that going to work out? And then the next night, they're at home against Minnesota, who are now 9, 10, and 4. Perfect record under John Hines. And it's the second half of back-to-backs there and a third game in 4 nights. So that's not going to be easy. New Jersey, Tampa, and Minnesota, 3 and 4 right there. Then on the Tuesday, so they only get 1 day off before the next home date against Florida, who are 14, 8, and 2. So Florida, very good record there. And then they only have 1 day off before on the 14th they play at home against Chicago. Chicago's 7, 16, and 1, and that's the most winnable game on this homestand. And then on the Saturday, the 16th, they are at home against LA, who are 15, 4, and 3, and still perfect on the road. 10 road wins so far. So this homestand, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games at home, and it's going to be tough because it's from the 7th to the 16th that these 6 games are played at home. So it is going to be a rough homestand, if that's the thing. Plus, there's times, too, where a team will be on a long homestand and things get a little bit lazy, stale with the team's play on a long homestand. We've seen that before. So, yeah, it's going to be a tough one. Then they go out on the road. They only have 1 day off before they're in Dallas on the 18th. Dallas is 14, 6, and 3. They only have 1 day off before they play in LA. Of course, as I mentioned, with LA, they're 15, 4, and 3. Not as good at home as they are on the road, but still pretty good. And then they finally have a couple of days off before they play in Anaheim on Saturday, December 23rd. So that's the last day before the Christmas break. Anaheim's 10 and 15. Seattle needs to win that game, but if Seattle doesn't have a good record between now and that game, it really won't matter very much. Then on the Wednesday, so the day after the Christmas break's done, they're in Calgary on the 27th. Calgary's 10, 12, and 3. Calgary looked like they were getting better, and then they've fallen off. But again, unpredictability and all that, and Seattle-Calgary games could be fun. And then on the Friday, so they have 1 day off before they're back home against Philadelphia. Philadelphia 13, 10, and 2 so far, and that's the end of the December schedule. So it's not an easy schedule. This is not a schedule that's going to give them a lot of time to practice, a lot of time to figure out what's gone wrong. Because often with a team that's in the kind of dire straits that Seattle finds themselves in, you need those extra days off. You need the schedule to give you that extra time to do a reset and to have practices. They're not going to have that. So then the question becomes one of, so Dave Hackstall. Hackstall with his extension and everything, and everybody talked about a good job he did last year. How long is it until his name comes up as the most likely way to try to fix things? Again, I think Seattle did overachieve a little bit last year. They did it through a lot of depth, a lot of scoring. You'll notice Burakovsky's not on the board. He wasn't amongst the top scorers last year. He was injured a lot as well, and he's been injured this year too. That hurts them. And when with other teams, they can absorb that kind of loss. But when you're a team that's producing goals at the 29th highest rate out of 32 teams, any goal scorer that's out of your lineup, it's going to hurt. So for Seattle, it has been a much tougher go of it in year 3 than it was in year 2. And I don't think they're going to end up rallying to make the playoffs. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. And how panicked are you if you're a Seattle fan? Or are you saying, you know what, it's only our 3rd year. We need to build up prospects and draft picks anyways. So, last year was fun and all, but we need to, commit to the process. Let me know your thoughts. Because again, with teams that are starting out, this is not necessarily unheard of territory. It's just Vegas got spoiled. So maybe there was some expectation coming out of year 2 that Seattle's going to be kind of spoiled too. And that has not been the case. But let me know your thoughts. How do you turn things around if you're Seattle? Do you try to make a trade? How do you make it work? Let me know your thoughts. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you've not done so already. Thank you guys so much for watching. And I promise I will also talk about a team that's playing well. I won't necessarily just talk about teams that are struggling. But it is fascinating to look at teams that are struggling. Because those are often where we find some of the best stories, right? So, yeah, let me know your thoughts. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.